Started North and Central. How?
Yeah.
Fiercely loyal. The players and the staff are to Zuma West.
And then next to me is the legendary. Can I say legendary?
I do go by the legend.
Welcome in, everyone. This is Dave Wiggins, host of the Baseball 101 podcast for Youth Baseball Midwest. Today, I'm joined by two outstanding gentlemen here. We have Nathan Yamnitz, the Director of Business Development for TrainHeroic. He is also the owner of Performance Zone Fitness. And we have right-handed pitching phenom Nick Moten here. Nick pitched at Westminster Christian Academy, and he is currently at SIUE Edwardsville. Very excited to have both you on. Nathan, I'm going to let you go ahead and introduce yourself and just kind of talk a little bit about your past in youth baseball and high school baseball and college, even pro baseball. And then we'll let Nick do his thing.
Yeah, appreciate it, Dave. Thanks for having us on the show. Guys, I've been in this industry here for well over a decade now. I've been working for myself for 15 years, running a business, training athletes. That's been my dream, my goal, my whole life. It was never intentionally to work with baseball players. That just kind of happened along the way. But it was one of those things, where when that starts to spin up, you dive all the way in. I played baseball growing up, loved it, and it was always something that filled me up. It was probably my best sport, not my favorite one when I was younger, but probably my best. And so just to dive in to learn from guys like the Eric Cressys of the world and people like that, and never stop the process of attempting to get better has been a big part of my process. So along the way, I've gotten to meet a lot of really tremendous young men, a lot of people who've gone on to play college, pro, ball. People like Nick on this call here. When Dave said he wanted to talk about what we could do to talk about the importance of appropriate performance training, I thought Nick would be a perfect person to reference because he's been in multiple different college weight rooms. He's had different programs throughout his whole life, and it is a process of finding what's best for you. So, that's what I'd like to encourage anybody listening to do, after all this is done.
Excellent. Nick, why don't you tell us about your baseball journey as a young man going through the youth baseball world, the high school baseball world, the club world, and now obviously you're in the college baseball world. So go ahead and hit us with that.
Thought we only had an hour.
Appreciate you, Dave, for having me on. Man, it's been a lot. So I grew up playing with the Blue Jays from about the time I could hit a ball and throw till about middle schoolish. Then I went over to the extreme for a little bit for about 2 years, and then I went through high school and club ball with the Gamers. Went to Arkansas out of high school, bounced around a little bit, went to Crowder, shout out Coach Lally, went to Houston, and now I'm at SIUE playing right now.
Hey, who was your coach at Houston?
Woody Williams was my pitching coach at Houston.
That's pretty cool. For those of you who don't know, Woody Williams pitched for the Cardinals back when I was younger. I guess
back when they won games.
Say what?
Back when they won games.
Yes, back when they were successful, Woody Williams pitched for them. Thanks for being on, guys. It's something that is a passion project for me is getting parents and younger athletes educated in the importance of a good strength and speed, a good functional strength program. I feel like everyone is so quick to pay for a hitting instructor. They're so quick to pay for a pitching instructor, and they kind of they have reservations, right? Like, why, my son's got a club fitness membership, or his weight room at his high school is plenty enough for him. And I just wanted to bring you on, Nathan, because I respect what you do so much, and the knowledge you have, and just the broad range of kids that you work with, right? You can work with an 8-year-old, or you can work with a professional athlete. Just kind of explain to people how important it is to build that foundation from an early age, and kind of break the stigma that, my son's too young to learn how to lift, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, appropriate movement is the most important thing. I think that's something that people they miss when they're coming in. They're like, oh, this is just weightlifting. I do weightlifting. And like, so we are very intentional. Anytime someone comes in for a first session, like Nick can tell you, we're going to put them on like some sort of a stabilization phase where they're not actually lifting a lot of weight, but they're going to feel the backside of their body fire like they never have before and be like, oh my God, I feel great when I'm done with this. Like working out isn't getting worn out. Like training is just getting better. It doesn't have to be, I'm exhausted, I'm whatever from it. So like you said, it can start, super young. We've had kids in the gym as young as like 6 years old. And we've also had high school and college kids come in who I take the weights out of their hand and I don't let them use them until they learn how to move the right way. Like the ability to load isn't based on age. It's based on movement capacity and fluency. And the earlier you can learn that, the better. I try to remind athletes all the time, or coaches all the time, and parents all the time that, especially from a young age, it's not necessarily the most skilled player in this very skilled sport that we're talking about. It's the best athlete who wins often. The stronger, faster, more athletic, more adaptable human being who wins. So that's what we try to train from a young age is appropriate, motor patterns and resiliency in their bodies.
Nick, when did you start basically not really getting in the weight room, but when did you start kind of working on being a stronger, more physical athlete?
I'd say probably right around my sophomore year. I got introduced to Nathan by one of my former teammates, Jimmy Overtop, and he would drive me after practice to Nate's, and I really wasn't working out at first. I was just doing a bunch of recovery stuff, just trying to stay healthy. And then that summer, I actually started working out with Nathan, and that's when I learned that like movement is what you need to have, in the weight room. You have to be able to do certain things, move the right way. It's not about how much weight you can lift. It's about how you move that weight and how your body responds.
Yeah, and I'd like to clarify something there. Like Nick had been in the weight room for years, not in our weight room,
Yeah.
but he
Yeah.
was an all-American football player, tremendous athlete. He'll walk up to you, look you in the eyes, do a standing back tuck for no reason, and just walk away like he's a freaky athlete, right? But Nick was also someone who came in as probably an overly developed skill guy who was overthrown for much of his young life and was being pitched every 5 days throughout the high school season and had already had elbow stuff going on. And it was, the name of the game was keep him on the field. And we had to focus on getting him moving right and building appropriate strength and resiliency to allow him to continue progressing, because otherwise we were going to hit a plateau and he was going to break down. We didn't want that to happen.
Yeah. That's a very good point. Is I'm sure you can view some high school athletes who are big, strong, physical young men who get after it in their high school weight room, and they could come in and they could do an assessment with you, and you could say, Bud, you're a few months from breaking down here. We need to completely overhaul your approach to getting more athletic, more physical. You may look the part, you may look great in a bathing suit, right? You may look great on the beach, but my goodness, if you want to stay long in this game, whether that's baseball, football, soccer, whatever, we need to make some serious changes. And I think that's often overlooked by a lot of the strength and conditioning community, is they just take, oh, well, he's a big, strong kid. Clearly he's doing what's right. And, are there certain non-negotiables when it comes to a program, let's say for baseball players, let's say for position players, let's use position players for an example. Are there certain non-negotiables that you really try to hammer into those programs?
Yeah. And first thing, what you're talking about is show muscles versus go muscles. Like there's a difference in training for those things. And we've got people who have both, but your go muscles are the most important ones. When you talk about like the non-negotiables from a baseball standpoint, what we want to talk about, what is baseball? Baseball is an overhead sport. You have to be an overhead athlete and you have to be rotationally proficient. It happens as all sport does. I tell people this all the time, one limb at a time. You must train unilaterally. You must train one arm, one leg at a time. You can't just sit there and do bilateral squats, bilateral bench, anything like that. Nobody ever pulled both hamstrings because you don't hop down the first baseline. You run one leg at a time. So when I'm talking about building a program from the ground up with all athletes, A strong unilateral strength base is wildly important. Appropriate stability and mobility through multiple ranges of motion. For baseball players, we got to talk about a lot of hip mobility, a lot of shoulder range of motion. Nick's done his fair share of shoulder cars and FRCs and things like that, functional range conditioning. It's not just what position can you get into, it's what position can you control in a healthy way that you can get into. So, if you're just looking for the quick hitters, the most important things, an appropriate shoulder care or shoulder arm care, program has to be there. I've seen kids in weight rooms. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, they're like, well, I need to strengthen my shoulders. And they're doing a barbell military press where their arms stop this high up and only come down this far. And there's no full range of motion happening here. There's no unilateral. There's no balance. There's no yielding, forgiving, dynamic, nothing going on. Like, there's smart ways to do this. Dave, you guys do it in your program. I see it all the time. There are plenty of other pitching coaches out there in the area who do a phenomenal job of adding this stuff in. It's stuff that we, just tack onto in my plan. And then from a rotational standpoint, rotational proficiency, but also rotational proficiency in both directions. Baseball being as one side dominant as it is, we see a lot of injuries in athletes because they're wildly overdeveloped on the right versus the left. And so we actually try to make sure that we force that opposite movement on them because A, it makes them better at bracing force, and B, it's just going to keep them healthier long term. They're going to be balanced better.
Yeah, that's great. Nick, at the schools you've been to, even at SIU Edwardsville, is there a collaborative effort between your pitching staff, the pitching coaches, and the strength staff? And the buzzword arm care pops up all the time, right? Like, there's a million different ways to do arm care. What have you found to be the most effective way to take care of your arm before and after you throw? And do you get kind of a collaborative effort between your pitching guys and your S&C guys at the collegiate level?
Oh yeah, for sure. I'd say for me at least, and for the schools I've been to, you know, it's dependent on the person. Like, somebody, if you want to do arm care, you can, but arm care in college looks like lifting weights. That's how you stay
Yeah,
healthy.
there you go.
And that's how you stay healthy. That's all it is. And then there is a really good collaborative effort between the strength coach, the pitching coach. They always know what's going on, what you threw, what you did that day throwing wise, what you're gonna do in the weight room. They make sure you're not lifting before you throw, you're lifting after, and things of that nature. Like, there's always everybody's interconnected and intertwined in a loop, and there's nobody ever left out.
And I
So
think
that basically,
collaboration is there.
sorry.
Like, guys, I've got to
Yeah.
say that, like, to be able to collaborate, to be willing to collaborate is hugely important. In the world that we're in right now, people like to try to own every single bit of it. And like, no, I'm not sharing my secrets. The truth is, guys, you don't have state secrets for the most part. Like, most good is good. And something I always appreciate about, most of the coaches we work with, and I think it's why we've had, success in our business, is to just be open to collaboration, communication at all times. Dave, your guys down at EPD are phenomenal at that. We've got PTs that we work with. We've got, like, hitting people we work with. If I'm going to reach out and say, hey, what's so-and-so's load look like this week? Like, what are they going through? It's going to help inform me of what we need to do better. And then they're going to have the same conversation both directions. So it's easier in a college setting to do that because oftentimes everybody's in the same place. But here we are on YBM. This is Youth Baseball Midwest. You got people driving literally all over the place to get the training that they need. So parents, just please make sure that your coaches are willing to collaborate with other people and to communicate. It's going to make your child's life and your life just much better.
I'm smiling because you took the words right out of my mouth. It was my segue was, if they're doing it at the highest levels, if they're doing it at the collegiate level, if they're collaborating at the professional level, why can't we have that same collaboration at the youth level, at the high school level? We need openness between trainers and PTs and strength coaches. There needs to be that line of communication there. Just like there needs to be the line of communication between the high school coach or the club coach and the trainer. If I'm a hitting coach, how often do I get to see my guy actually face a live arm in a game? More times than not, I'm watching him in a cage. I need to know what those swings look like in a game. I need to know the approach in the game. So I'm not just trying to build the swing over and over. I'm trying to enhance my hitter's ability to actually hit the baseball. And the same goes with strength and just speed and overall athletic performance. A lot of times, you know, me as a coach, I'm trying to help a kid throw harder. I'm trying to help a kid get into his back leg more. He might physically not be able to do that. And if he's working with someone who I can talk to on that side and they can explain what he's been working on, or what their focus is there, it gives me a little bit of insight as, okay, maybe I need to approach this a little bit different way. And I feel like a lot of times in our world, especially, pitching and hitting trainers try to do too much, and we need to be able to rely on um, people who know the body and how the body moves better than we do. And I think that's just going to help better all of our athletes here in this area. Would you agree, Nathan?
Yeah, I love that, and I think you just reminded me of a couple of my favorite conversations I've ever had, doing this in this area. And actually, shout out Chris Little. A lot of you know Christian Little. He's with the Mariners now. He's #1 player in the country for quite a while in high school. He's actually in Nick's graduating class before he reclassed to go to Vandy earlier. But I remember Chris walking in one day and just saying, like, hey, he's like, this is what he's struggling with on the mound right now. What can we do? What tweaks can we make to the movements that you're currently doing in the weight room to help him feel his back hip better, to help him feel what's going on over here better? And I thought about it, and like, it wasn't challenging me. It wasn't telling me that, like, hey, you're not good at what you do. It was asking me, can we make it better? And I was like, oh, we should do this every day. Let's have these discussions all the time. And obviously you can get like too, specific with certain things, but I loved that. Like, I just thought that was hugely important to be able to then, for him to go in when working with Christian, or for his pitching coach at the time, to be able to say, hey, do you remember that move that you're doing? You remember what you feel there? That's what I want you feeling here. To draw connections from other places of their life into that moment when they're on the mound is huge. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to move into a topic that I feel can sometimes be a little bit skewed, and it's how important is it that you know the sport of baseball, or that you were a great baseball player, for you to be able to train elite baseball athletes? And is it something that you make a point of emphasis to get better at each day? Is learning more about the game of baseball, even though you're not necessarily in it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. I would tell people, um, don't look at my athletic career at all against any of the athletes I've ever worked with, because that'll just be really depressing for me. But what I would challenge anybody to do is to say, who's going to be the hardest worker in the room when it comes to understanding what the needs are of that person. And that's something I've always, prided myself on, like whether it was going to visit Eric Cressy, or, Mike Boyle, the godfather of modern strength and conditioning, or, just anybody else you can network with, collaborate with, learn from. The best people aren't trying to keep it all a secret. The best people aren't trying to, like, hold all the information in. They want everybody to be able to have that time and ability to get better. So do you have to have played the sport at an extremely high level to be good at coaching it? No. Can it give you an easy leg up early on? Absolutely. But if you're willing to put in that work, and you're willing to take the time and the energy to learn how to be the best there, like, that's the most important thing. There are plenty of people, like, guys, like, we're in St. Louis, Missouri here. What are the two sports that that St. Louis puts out the most professional athletes in? It's NFL football and NBA basketball. Except for that one year we had like 6 kids drafted in the NHL. What are the two pro sports that St. Louis has? Baseball and hockey. Sometimes that history actually slows you down because you aren't willing to adapt and to change to the way that things are working now, and so that's, I would say, if you haven't changed since 1989 when Bigger, Faster, Stronger came out, and you think that's enough, you probably need to change in the weight room. I would say if you have no history and you haven't gone back to look and to learn from other people who do have history and who have done this before, you're also making the wrong move. So take the best of both worlds.
Nick, you've had an interesting yet well-traveled college career so far.
Yeah.
Explain to me just the wear and tear that pitching at a high level, that throwing as hard as you do, can put on your body, and just the emphasis of recovery and the emphasis of keeping yourself on the field, and how important that is to being able to pitch at that level. I mean, obviously
Yeah.
you've thrown as hard as 100 miles an hour in your career. right? Um, just give me some of your testimony there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I got you. Like going into my freshman year, I was super excited. And I remember going through the fall at Arkansas, and I remember it just being the longest fall ever. You're scrimmaging 3 times a week. You're working out 4 or 5 times a week, and it's just a grind on top of classes, homework, trying to maintain a social life. It's a lot, and it's a lot of wear and tear on your body. And I think the biggest things I've learned is like you got to prioritize your sleep. Sleep is your best friend. That's how you recover. Drinking a lot of water, whether that be a gallon a day, gallon and a half. I wouldn't go any more than that. Um, and then one of the biggest things is me and they talked about this probably, what have we known each other? 8 years, 9 years almost. It feels like it.
It's been a long time. I don't hold you.
It's been I know I'm on now, but mobility, stretching, you know, before you throw, after you lift, before you lift. I had this thing every time in high school, after I get done throwing, get done lifting, I ran myself through my own stretching program there. And that honestly is what kept me healthy and expendable. I was able to be out on the field more, and that's what college coaches want. They want availability and they want you to be ready to go at, moments notice. Like you might get one warm up pitch in the bullpen and you got to go out there and be ready to throw. So, those three things are, the biggest things for me.
I mean, you hit the nail on the head right there where you said you might get one
Yeah.
warm-up pitch and you might be out on that mound. How many kids
Yeah.
do we know who have a 45-minute to an hour-long pre-pitching routine where they gotta bounce their balls on the trampoline and they gotta get their bands in, they gotta do their med ball tosses, and they gotta do their hip thrusts like CJ Stroud. But no, it's like when you get to the collegiate level,
All right.
so yeah. Sometimes that pitching coach, he wants to see how tough you are. He wants to see if you
Yeah.
can break routine and go get outs. And I think
Yeah.
that's something that kind of smacks a lot of these guys in the face. And that, I mean, even at the JUCO level, even at the lower Division III, Division II levels, like these coaches, they want toughness, they want physicality, and they want to see guys who can handle stepping outside of their comfort zone, and they want to test them. And
Yeah.
if your body is not ready for that, if your body is used to doing the same thing over and over and can't break from that routine, not only are you not going to succeed, but you're going to break down.
Yeah.
And that's to me, it's been the hardest thing, like trying to get the high school guy to understand the difference between high school baseball and college baseball. And it's not necessarily, obviously, it's the level of play, but it's the expectation from the coach to the player is so different. And I mean, obviously, Coach Petke's an outstanding coach. He's a great guy, but I'm sure his expectations for you at Westminster were far different than Coach Van Horn's expectations for you at Arkansas, right? Or Woody's
Yeah.
expectations for you at Houston, or even Coach Lyons at SIUE. Can you kind of hit on that?
Yeah. So every coach is different in how they run things. I think there's the one consensus thing that a lot of coaches want is availability. You know, how available can you be at a moment's notice? Like I said earlier, and I think it's being healthy, being available, how healthy. It's a long season. It's 50 some odd games, 60 some odd games if you go through the playoffs and go to the College World Series. So it's a lot of ball. So you really have to stay on top of things. Really have to be taking care of yourself. You only get so much time at the field, so it's about what you do outside the field, what you do at home, what you're eating. Making sure you're ready to go.
Well, and something I got to give Nick credit for, that he really he learned a little bit of it when he was a sophomore in high school, and he really dove into it when he was a senior. We had kind of that junior year with COVID was
Yeah,
weird,
yeah,
things like
yeah,
the focus went away. But Nick has always been very good at being willing to explore his own process and figure out what can make it. And that's a huge thing that you have to be able to do long term. We have other pro ball pitchers who have gone through this. Like, I've been a starter my whole life. I don't know how to warm up that fast. Like, the most prime example is, I'm sure Nick, you'd agree, was Irv Carter. Irv's with the Blue Jays, And Irv would legitimately be just drenched in sweat. He's gone through like every ladder drill, every sprint drill, every hurdle drill, everything. It takes he would literally go and get in the hot tub when he was told it was time to start warming up to come into a game. It was an hour and a half long process. He's moved to the bullpen and he's actually thriving there. But it took learning what his process had to be and what the most important movements for him were, because they're not the same for everybody. Certain people don't feel certain things the same way. And so Nick has been good at that his whole career. Christian Little's gotten better at it recently. Irv, who we just talked about, Irv's warm-up went from, an hour and a half to hour and 45 minutes to now it's 5 to 15. He can get hot when he needs to, but he's had to learn what his body personally needs to get there. So it's a process. You got to be willing to explore a bit.
Yeah, I've seen guys like, oh, well, I was gonna say I've seen guys have, like Nate said, hour long routines, and I've seen guys just throw the football and go play catch. And it's different for everybody. Me, I don't need too much. Rip a couple plyos, get the shoulder going, get everything going, T-spine going. I'm ready to go. Let's go. Let's go compete. So it looks different for everybody. And it's just about being adaptive and learning what works for you and what doesn't. Because I'm not saying everything is eyewash. Hour-long routine is eyewash by any means. If it works for you, it works for you. But, you got to be able to be adaptive. You got to be able to learn. And the biggest thing is you got to learn how your body moves in space. That's one of the most important things I learned from Nate early on, is how my body moves in space. And I think over time, like, that has been what has made me such a great athlete, and, been able to enhance my abilities, because I can go to him and tell him, hey, I'm feeling this. And he's like, all right, we're going to do this, this, and this. And then when you go throw, let me know how it feels. And then I'm be like, I go throw, I'm like, dude, I felt that. That's exactly what I wanted to feel. And so,
no matter how good of a coach I might be, or Adam, who Nick has thrown with for a long time, might be, or anybody may be, your ability to connect to your own body is your greatest coach. And your ability to give that feedback to the other people in your life who have that expertise to help you hone that's the most important thing you can do. I will also say, guys, it is so much easier to have a full-on hour-long routine when you know you were the starter. When you are Paul Skeens and you know that you're every sixth day, that you have to go out there. You can do the water bags. You can do every other thing. When you're Paul Skeens, you can do whatever you want. Like, first thing, just that's. But you have more ability to do that. And so, when your career path changes, or they need you to come out of the pen, or something's not quite the same way, it's important to have a little bit of that compete factor in you. And I think that that's something that we lose a lot of times in what we call the cage ball era that we're in, where everybody's just they're training in a cage, they're hitting in a cage, they're throwing in a cage, they're fielding in a cage. You lose some of that ability to just go be a damn dog in between the lines. And we have to find ways to build that into your programming, to your conditioning, to whatever else you have going on. You have to be able to build competition and adaptability into it.
I was going to ask you, how do you build toughness into your guys in the weight room? How do you, is there a formula? Is it different? Like, obviously it's different for a 10-year-old versus a college guy or a pro guy, but I mean, how do you get them to compete in the weight room?
Competing in the weight room actually is the easy part. Building competition that translates to the field can be tougher. And Nick can tell you, we've had quite a few times, sometimes in facilities that do not have climate control, where, there's people just laying on the ground in puddles of sweat. We have a guy who used to work out with Nick, and we would go back and forth competing all the time. He would run with a full on trash can in his arms, like, while doing this conditioning workout, because lose, and sometimes those things aren't smart. Like, this is not I'm not stumping for, like, make your kid go want to throw up. That's not the idea here. For us, like, there are different conditioning pieces that we'll use, just to get different energy systems working, things like that. Their body's going to be better because they've learned how to work in these different energy systems. That's important. B, they're going to learn how to, like, reach inside and find a little bit more of that kind of dog in there. But for some people, like, it's so much more mental than it is physical. You don't have to physically punish somebody to improve their toughness. You just have consistency. Sometimes is the hardest thing to gain. And I will say this, for most youth athletes, It's not, can this kid get through a 1 or 2 mile assault bike or a sled sprint EMOM finisher or whatever. It's, can they keep showing up in, mid-December when they've been training for their off season for 4 months already to try to get better for next year, and they don't have a game in sight for 3 more months. It's just so easy to say, I want to take time off. Real toughness like that's when that shows up, because they're still showing up and putting in that work. Consistency is one of the hardest skills to lock in as a young athlete, and it's probably the most important one.
That's awesome. I love what Nick said about being aware of how my body moves in space. Thankfully, our sport over the years has gotten away from the mechanical, just, leg up, leg down, stride out, follow through, just BS pitching mechanics, and has moved way more towards just be an athlete and move your body in space, move as dynamically as you can. Obviously, there's certain mechanical aspects we have to hit, but be as athletic as you can be as a thrower, and that's going to make you a better pitcher. And
Yeah.
obviously, with that thought and that mindset, I think it's created harder throwing arms. I think it's created more electric type stuff coming out of guys' arms. Tighter sliders, harder breaking balls. But it's also probably led to a few more injuries. And Nathan, how do you encourage and get your kids to understand that if you want to play at a high level, you have to move dynamically and ballistically, but at the same time, how do you protect them from those injuries?
Yeah, a couple things. Thing number one, at a certain point, an injury is going to happen to you in your career. If you play long enough, it's going to happen. Like sometimes it's a privilege thing that you've just been able to put enough miles on it to get to that point. Okay, so that has to be acknowledged. There are good and bad practices. There are things that we can try to make sure that we're doing to avoid those things. But I actually was almost going to make the opposite argument. When we've learned how to throw more athletically, some injuries have been prevented because we've learned how to throw more athletically instead of just trying to put people in a box. In today's world, everybody has to have a hook. Everybody has to have a thing. 90% of the guys who are out there arguing on Twitter are actually teaching the same thing, just in a different way. Or they're only as aggressively fighting against that other thing because they're trying to prove their point. They have to have their thing. Swing coaches are probably the worst at this. I will say it. They're just super vocal. And the truth is, what works for that person works for that person. From a pitching coach standpoint, the thing I hated hearing for years was, oh, he's got a DeGrom-like motion. What does that mean? He pitches for 6 weeks and then he goes away for the next, 46. He's not going to be healthy because by design, the way Jacob deGrom throws a baseball looks fluid as hell, but it is violent on his arm, and so learning how to be more athletic, like we've got some large dudes who were told to try to throw like Jacob deGrom. When you got a barrel-chested individual out there who drives his power from his lower half, he's not just going to tall and fall down the damn mound and then punch his hips through at the end. It doesn't work that way. So like Nick said, finding what works for your body. Like I would consider Nick more of a power pitcher with his mechanics now than he ever used to be when he was younger. And until he embraced that, he couldn't get to where he fully was capable of being. So again, it's evaluation of the individual in front of you. And then once you evaluate them, don't just put them in that box. There's, and I'm not going to go in on names or anybody here. There is certain people who are like, hey, because you tested this way on this one movement in this one test, we now know that you are this kind of an athlete, and they only train you in that way. You still got to work those inefficiencies. You still got to work those end ranges of motion. We have a kid, center fielder at Mizzou, Caden Pierre. Caden's a stud. Shout out Caden. Caden would be considered a narrow profiled athlete by most people in today's world. But Caden Pierre can gain ground in his swing with a wide base better than almost any human being you've ever seen. So to make Caden better, it doesn't necessarily benefit him to say, let's get you narrow. That can actually cause more problems than to say, let's strengthen you at those end ranges that you normally would not be strengthened from. You just have to look at the athlete. There's trial and error, there's communication. It's a relationship that's ongoing all the time, and there can't be ego involved in it of, well, this was my idea, this is my way of doing this, because you're going to have to change it. You're going to have to adapt because the person in front of you adapts and the game adapts.
That's outstanding. That's very, very well said. And it's what we have to do as baseball coaches as well. We have to adapt. We can't be stuck in our ways. We can't put kids into just one box like, hey, all my hitters need to swing this way. They all need to have the same approach. Everyone's different. Everyone moves differently. And me as a baseball coach, I've found that being able to coach baseball has become easier for me, and working with many different kids, thanks to people like Nathan and other movement specialists who can explain to me like, hey man, you're trying to do this with athlete A. Athlete A physically cannot do this. Approach it this way instead. And sometimes we as coaches, we see what we think is pretty, or we see what we think looks good to us. And it's not necessarily what works best for that kid. And I we can all take a little bit of advice in that front as to try to get away from what we think something should look like. And college coaches do it all the time. I mean, we're high school, we're travel coaches, we're trying to get our guys seen by schools, and we get told over and over by certain college coaches and programs, athlete A doesn't do this well enough, or athlete A, I don't like how this looks, or I don't like his arm action, or blah blah blah. We're doing our kids a disservice as ones who are helping to develop them, whereas a lot of these college coaches don't need to develop guys anymore, thanks to the portal and all these new rules. We're not in the business or the boat of deciding what something should and shouldn't look like. We need to find out how to help the individual and understand that they all move differently, and we need to take that movement profile and help them maximize what they can from that standpoint. And that can't be done just by watching a kid throw, by watching a kid swing. We don't understand the inner workings. People like Nathan and other strength coaches and physical therapists, they understand those things at a much higher level. So, I just encourage you, if you're working with your kid, or you're working with your club team, or your high school team, or whoever, seek out advice from people who know a little bit more than you do about how kids move, about how people move, how humans function. It's helped me a ton in my coaching. And I thank you, Nathan, for a lot of that conversation and advice throughout the years.
Yeah, I mean, you make it easy, Dave. I've long said you're one of the happiest people in baseball, and especially youth baseball in St. Louis. So it's always easy to want to talk to you about those things. You bring up something, I think it's important that parents hear this, that like, college coaches don't have to develop you anymore. That is just the truth of it. So a lot of times they're just going to try to get people that fit in their bucket and the way that they do things. And if they don't fit into that mold, it can be really tough. I think one of the fallacies of this game is we assume that people at higher levels must know more. Sometimes they do not. We have one of Nick's best friends, I call him his little brother, Nazan Zanatello. Naz has been with the Red Sox, for a couple of years. And after not the first year in pro ball that he wanted to have, he was told that the answer was, we got to get your bat speed up, because the Red Sox were a bat speed organization that believed in swinging heavy bats, light bats, things like that, and get your barrel speed up. Naz had an average in-game barrel speed of 79.5 miles per hour. That is top 5 in Major League Baseball if you were in the majors at that point. Swinging the bat faster was not the answer. Getting a better path, getting on plane, recognizing things earlier, being able to be weaponized earlier in his swing was the most important thing for him. But that wasn't something that he was going to learn, through that approach. So again, it's going back and finding what works for you, seeking out as many experts as you can along the way to try to fix those things, to try to meet those things. You gotta take care of yourself. Like we said earlier in the conversation, you got to find what works for you.
Nick, being in the St. Louis baseball scene, does it cost money to get better at baseball?
No, I wouldn't say so. I'd say, listen, I remember growing up, and I used to go to the field with my dad all the time, and he never made me do it. I wanted to do it. And as a kid, if you want to be good at a sport and you truly love that sport and you want to be great at it, you're going to find other ways to do it. Now, it might cost money for the equipment, obviously, and things like that, renting out batting cages, but I don't think so. If you really want to be great, you're gonna find other ways to do it.
I would also say that doesn't always cost money to get better is probably a good answer there. Like, do you need to seek out
Yeah.
experts from time?
Oh,
Absolutely.
yeah.
But if you're doing that work on your own, like you're missing out on chances. Like the number of parents who are like, oh, kid had a bad day at the plate, went 0 for 3. We better change something in the swing is unreal to me. Just
Yeah.
drives me crazy. Like no, just get back to the basics. Make sure you have that solid home with your swing where you know where you need to start. You know how to get your timing back. Things like that. You can do so much on your own when you've learned from the right people. I would say fall in love with coaching, but don't become addicted to it. Like if you can't perform when somebody's not in your ear all the time, you're doing it wrong in the first place. That's why my business moved away from one-on-one coaching a long time ago. It was more important to me that these athletes learned about themselves and learned how to compete with one another and to push each other than that I got paid double the money for the hour from that one person. So
Oh,
yeah.
I'll back Nate up on this. Fall in love with the process of things, not the result. I'll say that much. Like there's so many times in my life where I wanted a result and it's like that's just not how it goes about. It wasn't until I started really working with Nate and where I really fell in love with the process. Like I knew when I started working out with Nate to all the way to now that like the things I do with him, the things I do with Jansen, like I know like I've worked on them so much that like when I go out and throw, there's no reason for me to overthink. There's no reason for me to be worried about a result because I've done step 1, step 2, step 3. So I'm mentally and physically ready to go out there and compete.
I think the fallacy that some people get in their minds sometimes when they look at guys like Nick or like Nas or people like that is that they're just different. They were born different. And hey, there's some good genetics in there. I'm not gonna lie. Like that definitely helps. But
Yeah.
be doing a disservice to each of them or to anybody like them to discredit the hard work that they put in. And like Nick's gotten some crap given to him in the gym sometimes. Like, he's still here. I'm like, yeah, he knows his process and he knows that this is what he needs to feel right, to move right, to get locked in, to be better. And so yeah, Nick has for sure fallen in love with the process, and that's why he's still playing baseball.
Final question for you, Nathan, kind of to go along with my question to Nick. The cost benefit analysis to getting your son in a legitimate strength program. Obviously, is it going to cost money? Absolutely. Why is that money better spent getting my son bigger, stronger, faster, more athletic, moving better versus taking hitting lessons, taking pitching lessons? Because I firmly believe, especially for most high school athletes, their money is better spent on a legitimate strength and movement program than it is a hitting or a pitching lesson. And I just want you to be able to kind of educate the public that's listening to this on why I feel that way or why it is so important.
Yeah. Well, first things first, we're going to go ahead and call it better, stronger, faster instead of bigger, because I think that's one of the biggest misnomers these kids. You just got to get bigger. You got to get bigger. One of the guys I mentioned on this call got drafted and was told that he couldn't play in a game until he gained 20 pounds because bigger meant he was going to be better eventually. It did not. Best athlete on the planet. Like, don't do that to that kid. So better, stronger, faster is what we like to focus on. It is going to cost money. The beautiful thing about the way the world works, and like these opportunities that I have, with my what was my side hustle, now kind of my main hustle at TrainHeroic, is there are remote opportunities available to do these same things too, where you can keep that cost down. But the truth is, until you are movement literate, until you have the requisite amount of strength, the requisite amount of muscular balance in your body as opposed to imbalance, which most kids come with just naturally, you're not going to be able to get to that result that you want. You can spend all damn day swinging 500 times a day until you're strong enough to support it and drive that swing from the right place. It's not going to be what we want it to be. You could throw all day long until you are strong enough and until the back of your shoulder is strong enough to keep you healthy while you're building your volume up like that. You're never going to get to the place that you need to be in without that base of athleticism, that base of strength. I said it early on in the conversation, the best athlete wins. When all other things are equal, the best athlete will still win. If the skills are the same and everybody is doing this person's throwing program for $200, $300, $400, $700 or $800 a month sometimes at some of these places locally, when they're all doing the same damn thing, what it's going to come down to is A, who's the best athlete, and B, who's putting in that work behind closed doors when you're not seeing it. And that work comes in a lot of forms. It comes not just from time spent in the weight room, not just from time doing stuff like that. Nick touched on it for 1 second earlier. That work recovering is so important. And in today's technology, like technological world, everybody thinks, oh, my recovery, I foam rolled, I used the Normatec, I iced, I had a Mark Pro, I used a stim, I did all these other things. And the one thing they forget every damn time is that they forget to sleep. Sleep is the most important thing you can do to get better. The absolute most important thing you can do to get better. And I'm hoping that some of our athletes are listening to this right now because you know exactly who I am talking about. You got to get better at it, or he's not going to be able to fuel itself to get through it without breaking down. So yeah, cost benefit analysis. Make your kid a tremendous athlete. They can do most anything going on. It is much easier to teach people how to play baseball than it is to teach them how to be freaks athletically. And if you need more proof, just watch the way the Cardinals draft for the next few years, because that's what Chaim Bloom believes in. He goes and gets the best athletes and says, we're going to teach them how to play ball.
Awesome.
And he pays them a lot of money to do it too.
Yeah. Nick, final thing for you. Give us a preview of the SIUE Cougars this spring. How you guys looking?
We're looking good. I haven't been able to be outside much, which is tough, but we opened up at North Alabama Valentine's Day weekend. I'm super excited about it. Go Cougs, man. Yeah, just praying for a healthy season, just ready to get after with the boys and go win the OVC.
Love it. Guys, thank you so much for being on. Thank you for taking time out of your day. It's been a great conversation with both of you. Nick, I wish you the best this spring. Man, I can't wait to see you on the mound again, punching hitters out. Nathan, as always, thanks for your time. Just want to end with one final thing. I can't stress enough the importance of making, no matter how old your athlete is, no matter what sport they want to play, please consider a good strength and conditioning program for your son, for your daughter, over a baseball or a softball lesson. And I give pitching lessons for a living, and I'm saying this. I see it time and time again. The kids that come into our facility that have a better time doing what we've asked them to do, that are more able to do what we asked them to do, that get more gains, that throw harder, that hit harder, they are the ones getting after it in the weight room. They're the ones with people who know what they're doing in the weight room. They're teaching them how to move. They're teaching them how to rotate. Lifting is not what we're talking about here. We're talking about learning how to move better. And our sport is finding more and more athletes that know how to move better, and they're playing at the highest level possible. And you see it throughout the years, and you'll see it as your kids go through. The kids that know how to move better, the kids that move more dynamically and more athletically, they're the ones that start to see more success as they get through high school. They might not have been the best player at 10, 11, 12, but by my goodness, when they're 16, 17, they're standing out above the rest because they learned how to move better. They learned how to be more athletic on a baseball field, and they didn't just work on the skill aspect. We play a skilled sport. The ones that are the absolute best, yes, they're the most skilled, but they are also the most athletic. They're the fastest. They jump the highest. They hit the hardest. Every college coach we're talking to right now is asking us, how fast can he run? How does he get after it in the weight room? What's his work ethic? Hey, he showed up and he wasn't as big as we thought he'd be. Hey, the physicality trumps all when it comes to getting your kid recruited nowadays at any level, D3 on up. Physicality trumps all, and being physical doesn't mean just being able to lift the heaviest. There's way more to it than that, and I can't stress that enough. That's kind of my soapbox for today. But thank you to everybody, Nick, to Nathan, and for all of us here at YBM. And I said it last week, say it again, Brian French and all his genius for putting these podcasts on. I'm just grateful to be here as a host for Baseball 101. I hope to see you guys next time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Dave. Appreciate it.
Appreciate you.